Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for joining us for this final session. And I'm delighted to say that joining us, we have Aaron Jarvis, Sales and Business Development for UK and Ireland at Geotab, Tina Mould, Sustainable Innovation Lead at Oxford City Council, and Steve Wolsterholme, Head of Fleet at United Utilities. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for joining us. Super thrilled to have you on this final panel of the first day of the EV Summit. Aaron, I believe you have some opening words for us. So over to you for some opening thoughts.
Sure, I think we've got some slides, so I'll jump up to the button.
Thanks very much.
So, hi everyone, I'm Aaron Jarvis. I look after commercial development for the UK and Ireland at Geotab. So what that means is I am responsible for making sure that Geotab's vision of becoming the platform that underpins the connected car for fleet managers comes to fruition. Now, what does that mean? We want to fundamentally make sure that insight from the vehicles of our customers is available for them, both for their own purposes, for the management of their business, but also to the ecosystem that supports that business. Whether that's bringing in tyre pressure data into our platform or making service maintenance and repair data available into the ecosystem that supports that fleet to make sure that the vehicles can stay on the road. So that's one core pillar, and the other pillar that's important to us is providing the tools that are required for fleet managers like Tina and Steve to be able to run their business efficiently and make sure that they can achieve their goals. Now, a goal that I think we're all particularly interested in today is electric vehicle transition, and so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about one of the tools that we've created for fleet managers, which is our electric vehicle suitability assessment. So fundamentally, the electric vehicle suitability assessment leans on some of the key principles of Geotab, which is using real-world data to make decisions for a fleet. Now, the EVSA, as we call it, uses real-world data from ICE vehicles that are driving on the road, and compares that to real-world data that we've seen in the world from electric vehicles. Now, what we're looking at in the ICE vehicles is their distances they're driving per day, the amount of money they're spending on fuel and procurement, and importantly, the temperatures and terrains that those vehicles are driving in, because as any fleet managers here will know that are trying to transition their fleet to electric, those are the key metrics that affect the range of electric vehicles. Now we're comparing that to the real world performance of electric vehicles in similar terrains, essentially. So for fleet managers like Steve, we'll put that into practice specifically for their fleet and allow them to look vehicle by vehicle at how they could transition and specifically which vehicles they could move to. But I think interestingly here today, I wanted to talk a little bit about a macro study we did in Europe looking at 46,000 vehicles and how many of those light commercial vehicles could transition to electric. And interestingly, we found that in terms of real world performance, up to 86% of those vehicles could transition to electric today, which is actually great. There's been a lot of panel sessions today talking about the anxiety of fleet managers and their drivers in terms of transition. And while we see that getting better as electric vehicles develop, we can see that in real world data that actually, a lot of the vehicles driving around Europe today could transition in terms of what they could do in the field. What's also interesting is up to 60% of those vehicles could transition economically. And what economically means is there'd be a lower total cost of ownership by transitioning to an electric vehicle. And what's important about the tool is it allows us to put in real world data on the day that we're running the study. So, what is the availability of the vehicle? What is the cost of that electric vehicle today? And what is the cost of energy? So it's really important to be able to be flexible when we're looking for profitable sustainability. More importantly, I guess, in the guise of sustainability is what would that mean in terms of carbon reduction? Ultimately, we're all on this journey to help reduce greenhouse gases. And what we found is over the 7-year life of the average vehicle in our study, we could save something like 5.7 tons of CO2. And I think once we start to get into the detail of those numbers, it becomes very interesting. And that leads us into some of the other work that we help fleet managers with, which is, helping them win business and helping them run their business based on the up-and-coming carbon reporting requirements that each fleet has. And we're seeing increasingly with our customers that they're not able to win new business unless they're able to talk about their sustainability plans and how they report on that sustainability. And we're really focused on creating those tools and making sure that fleet managers can run their business and answer the questions they're getting from their sales teams and from their CEOs around how their business is making the transition. And that is probably enough about from me talking about Geotab, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with Steve and Tina here on the panel.
So we've just heard an interesting study there on the first stage of adopting electric vehicles, which is to find out to what extent EVs can meet a fleet's operational, financial and environmental needs, with a tremendous 86% of analysed vehicles being able to transition to range-capable EVs without having to charge midday. So I'd like to turn this over to the panel now in terms of what fleet panelists are now getting a better sense of where you are in your journey to fleet electrification. So Tina, over to you please on your fleet electrification journey.
So we have cars, vans, tippers, street sweepers, refuse vehicles, and they work across, again, a number of different sort of parts of organisations, so building services, grounds maintenance, car parks, pest control, refuse collection, street cleaning, etc. We currently have around 25% of our fleet migrated to electric. Most of that is sort of light commercial vehicles. We have some other vehicles, so a refuse vehicle, a street sweeper, a couple of tippers that we've managed to migrate to electric, mainly through grant funding. And we reckon we can get to around 40% or around 140 of our vehicles under a sort of total cost of ownership model. After that, it becomes quite prohibitive just from a cost perspective, because a lot of the sort of larger heavy goods type vehicles like the refuse vehicles are so expensive, they're double the price of a diesel vehicle, an ICE vehicle, and therefore it becomes, we just don't have the funding currently to migrate the rest. So that's the biggest barrier for us at the moment is the cost.
When you're talking about your fleets, do you also include the commercial arm of Oxford City Council, Oxford Direct Services?
ODS, yes, yeah. So I meant Oxford Direct Services, who operate all of our fleet, yes.
Would you like to just give a quick note on how Oxford City Council and ODS work and what ODS is for the audience?
So yes, sorry, apologies. So Oxford Direct Services is the sort of workforce arm of Oxford City Council, and they operate and manage all of our fleet and provide all of those services for Oxford City Council.
For those of you interested in this interesting commercial piece, lots of city councils have commercial arms, local authority companies, LATCOs, so there are a couple of fleet opportunities working with some of the city councils. Steve, over to you at Fleet United Utilities. Can you give us a sense of your fleet experience, please?
Good afternoon. So I'm Steve Wolsterholme, the head of fleet for United Utilities. So if you're not familiar, we are the water company that cover the northwest of England. And we have a fleet of around about 3,000 units. And if you name a type of vehicle, we've probably got it. So quite similar to Tina, really. So from your HGV fleet through to your van fleet, company car, through to plant tractors that we have on our operational sites. And we've set the pledge that by 2028 we'll have 100% green fleet. So we've been incredibly ambitious with our target. And in terms of where we're at the journey at the moment, we're still quite early days in terms of the number of vehicles that we've transitioned over. But really kind of the focus for us over the last couple of years has been putting a lot of the foundations in place for us to do large-scale deployment of EVs. So going back around about 18 months ago, we didn't have any telemetry, we didn't have any knowledge of the detail of the vehicles to tell us whether or not we could transition over to electric. So we didn't know things like average vehicle range, we didn't know things like the maximum miles that vehicles would do on a day-to-day basis. And even in terms of like where those vehicles would dwell, where the basis would be, we didn't know that. So the big part of our transition has been to put telemetry in the whole fleet, which has been kind of our partnership with Geotab. And really what that's done now is given us our roadmap to 2028. So it's allowed us to kind of pace what vehicles we can transition to electric and kind of what we will do in future years moving up to 2028. So that's on the vehicles, and then the other side of it, we've been deploying our own infrastructure, and we've got several thousand operational sites throughout the northwest of England. And we, at the moment, are in kind of the phase of the project deploying infrastructure on a lot of our operational sites, which again has been kind of informed through the data work that we've done with Geotab.
Aaron, could you give us some real-world insights into how you work with city councils, with large commercial fleets? What's your first point of engagement? How do you go through that journey in advising them?
So the key point is making sure that there's data there to look at. So we always say at Geotab, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so, Steve's a great example working with United Utilities. We've moved from a situation where as a business, they didn't have much measurement of what was happening with the fleet and have quite quickly been able to get to the point where not only can we look at simple things that I was talking about before, like the range and temperatures that the vehicles are operating in, but also where they're dwelling overnight, as an example. So, it's quite common for a fleet manager of a large fleet to get to the point where actually there's some surprises in the fleet about, well, I thought actually most vehicles were parking at this depot, or I didn't realise actually how many of the fleet were parking in central London or on the side of the road, or where they were dwelling in the middle of the day. And by gathering that data, we're able to work with the fleet and the fleet managers to make sure that we're acting on real-world information and deploying infrastructure where it's required, and the speed of charging, as an example, where it's required.
Does your data deliver any interesting patterns between large commercial fleets and city local authority fleets?
Yeah, I think the most interesting insight is that how many similarities there are between fleets. And similarly, we're talking with some leasing companies earlier today, and actually the common issues that fleets face, whether they're a local council or a large utilities companies, tend to start to be the same, and that allows us to build those insights globally and share them with our customers. So things like making sure vehicles are kept on the road, things like drivers stopping for long charging breaks on rapid chargers when the business has deployed charging for them at home because they wanted to stop and have a nice coffee. They happen everywhere, and so it's the similarities are the shocking insight for us, I would say, or the most powerful insight.
Can you give us some insights into some of the surprises, maybe some of the positive surprises that you're able to deliver to clients, and maybe some of the less positive ones?
Sure. What would I say is positive? I think how quickly a fleet manager can discover the scale at which they could transition their vehicles. So most fleets that we start working with discover quite quickly that the range anxiety within the fleet is exaggerated, let's say. So suddenly there is a clear roadmap actually to transitioning. I suppose some of the less positives would be some of the low-hanging fruit that are in the fleet, which I would then spin as a positive. How many drivers don't think they can transition because of the amount of fuel they're burning in a day, but actually they're idling or they're not driving the vehicle very efficiently, and things like taking a demo vehicle, discovering that I can't do my job for the day, but actually when we look into the data, there's some coaching there, and actually the driver behaviour changes quickly lead to a transition to an electric vehicle.
Tina, what have you learned from a customer side from the data experience?
I think we learned, because we went through a similar sort of exercise of kind of learning a lot about our fleet and then working out which ones we could migrate. I think what surprised me, I suppose, much as anything, is actually how not easy, but how it is possible to match more electric vehicles than I thought there would be. And that's becoming increasingly easier to do because more and more models come onto the market. Because actually we find that most of our vehicles probably not doing more than 60 miles a day. So sort of battery range actually is not such an issue. And even then you get into the larger van areas where maybe the vehicle, the range of the batteries isn't so great anyway, but still you can quite comfortably do that range within on a day-to-day basis. And actually probably most of the time we probably only need to actually charge our vehicles maybe every third or fourth day. So I think that was one of the kind of surprising things that we learned.
Mm-hmm. So moving on then, what strategies did you use to determine whether EVs are right for your fleet and to increase the viability of electric vehicles? Any interesting insights there? Tina, over to you maybe.
I think it's really, I would reinforce everything that everybody said, the guys said so far. Everything is about data. It's quite a scientific process. So you really need to understand about how your fleet operates, and having a really good telematics system or be able to get that data in is really vital. I mean, we didn't have that at the beginning. We had quite an outdated system, and we had to get all of the data, or just GPS data, trawled out of our existing vehicles, and then it was like 10 million records of a year's worth of data to be analysed to work out what the average distance was, what the furthest distance anything had done, what the outliers would be, how many CO2 emissions, how many NOx emissions. So having that information provided to you through a good system and having access to it is really essential, really. So
obviously we're the EV Summit. We're all about promoting the transition to EVs, but has the data delivered any insights that suggest that certain use cases in your fleets are not suitable for EVs?
Well, I think there's some vehicles that, and some of the vehicles that we have probably would be very difficult to actually migrate at the moment. And then there's other considerations. For example, some of the street sweepers, for example, we have, once you add a battery, they become quite heavy, and therefore there's certain areas of the street where they can't go because you can't add an extra load onto it. So there's a few bits and pieces we've learned along the way, but I think on most cases we probably could migrate it, most vehicles, if we could put everything else in place that we wanted to and had enough money to do so.
So, Steve, any use cases that aren't suitable for EVs in your fleet world?
So we do. I mean, so we cover, like I say, about 3,000 vehicles, and it's to about 140 different roles. Now, where we cover in the northwest of England, we've got, big cities like Manchester and Liverpool, and for those, certainly more suitable for EV because generally our employees don't do as many miles. But on the flip side, we cover the Lake District, we cover the Ribble Valley, so it's a completely different experience. And I think certainly one of the things that has been really useful from the data is, I think where commercial fleet and transition into electric is different from cars is, I think if someone's driving an electric car, they've probably gone and done that research themselves. They've probably looked at, what's their average mileage that they do. They've probably done their own research into the vehicle, where they put the infrastructure. I think one of the big challenges that we've had certainly in my job is working that people change journey, and this is where the data has made a massive difference. Because if I take the employees that we're deploying EVs to, we've got some which are absolutely chomping at the bit. They want to be part of the future world. They want to adopt EVs. But then we get a huge spectrum where some of our employees really have quite serious anxiety about moving over to electric. And a big part of my role is how do we manage that people change journey. Now, what's really helpful in terms of looking at it from a data perspective and how we've worked with Geotab is we can take each employee through their journey, so we can show them what is the average mile that they're doing on any given day, what's the most that they've ever done on a given day, and then we can match that to the infrastructure that we're deploying. And what we've done is we've geo-fenced every one of our operational sites and where we've put the charging infrastructure, which basically allows us to tell an employee, well, you're doing an average of, say, 30, 40, 50 miles a day, but you will be based on one of our sites for X number of hours. And as long as we can match the dwell time on our operational sites where we've got the infrastructure with the habit and the driving pattern of that individual, then we can take each individual through that journey and give them confidence. And that's been one of the kind of the huge wins for us. And probably part of the transition to EVs that I don't hear much about is that people change journey. And it's absolutely critical to getting it right in an organisation.
So, Aaron, are you considering setting up a data therapy unit within the Geotab business?
Yeah, potentially. I think, Steve's fleet's a great example of how they're looking at the data pre-transition, so they can look at driver behaviours before putting someone in an electric vehicle to show, basically you're driving in a way which will make it really difficult for you. Here's what you should do differently, and we're going to coach you in that way before we stick you in an electric vehicle. So actually, it's not a painful experience through the learnings that others have done before in the fleet.
Interesting question for maybe all of you. Is data enough, though? Is there still an emotional component in terms of that education, customer journey? And if so, what are those other barriers that once you've got the data, you still need these additional emotional variables in place?
Yeah, it amazes me the myths that you get around it even today. So, when we transition someone to electric, what we do is we take them out and we go through a training exercise with them and we personalise it. And I think that's the key thing, is we personalise the journey for the individual. And I think that's the critical thing which removes the emotion from it. And like Aaron said earlier in the presentation, most people assume they do more miles than what they actually do. And most people assume that electric vehicles won't do the amount of miles that they actually do. So when you combine them two, that's partly why we see that range anxiety. So I think the key is to kind of look people in the white of their eyes, take them through that journey themselves, but personalise it for the individual as well.
We seem to like using the word anxiety a lot in the EV sector, don't we? So interesting new data-led approach to how we deliver the transition anxiety piece and the answers to that question. Let's talk about charging infrastructure and how your data analysis and maybe the aggregated sense of that across all of your customers helps to deliver on their understanding of how to implement charging infrastructure. Could you share some insights on that, please, Aaron?
Yes, certainly. So made reference to it slightly before, but just knowing specifically where the vehicles are dwelling is really important. We're actually doing some work now with the Association of Fleet Professionals to help, as a country, the UK look at that. So we're providing the dwelling data aggregated for all of our customers, essentially, to help make available to fleet managers some insight to start to leverage with local councils and with local government to say, for example, there's thousands of drivers in this area that are parking on the side of the road. But actually, here's the data to prove that, to show that there's a market demand for it, so that a local council in one borough of London versus another might go out and try to procure some curbside charging. And I think that side of things, I think it's well known in the UK that quite a large percentage of van drivers are parking their vehicles on the side of the road at night. Making that data available in aggregate to help the industry is something that's quite important to us in terms of moving forwards.
Tina, you're doing some quality nodding over there.
I think it would be a really, really useful bit of information. So yeah, we've been talking about similar lines. It's useful for the Highways Authority because they understand also about kind of usage on their roads, and they can think about how they're going to manage that road. But also from a provider of public infrastructure, it's also an essential bit of knowledge for us as well. So that, the more that we can do that and share information, the better it is for everybody. And I mean, from that perspective as well, from ODS and where we're putting our charging infrastructure, then Owen, who's the fleet manager, is sitting up there. We're looking at where we can put sort of more charging infrastructure for our own fleet, but potentially where it also then could also be utilised by the public. And so, can we get sort of collaboration and sharing of infrastructure? So, yeah, we use a lot of the location mapping, and GPS data is really useful for many perspectives.
Thanks very much. And Steve, some insights from your side on how data's led to charging infrastructure implementation, please.
Yeah, so we kind of got three strands to our charging strategy. So where we can, we've adopted home charging. We've deployed that on quite a few employees' properties, and that's a great solution because about 80% of our fleet is home-based. So we don't have the luxury of returning all the vehicles to a depot, charging them, and then everybody goes and does their job on a full charge. So we've had to charge out of hours, and that home charging is a great solution, really, and is a great kind of benefit for our employees. And then we've looked at our own operational infrastructure, and as I say, we've got a huge number of operational sites around the northwest. Now, what we've done is we've geofenced all of them using kind of the Geotab solution. So we understand the dwell time, the number of vehicles that go onto our own sites, and that's helped us determine kind of how many operational infrastructure charge points we need, the type, where we base them. And again, that's a great solution because what we didn't want to do when we deploy EV is introduce a lot of downtime for our employees. So we didn't want to take employees off their operational job, go and charge for an hour on a third-party site on public infrastructure because it introduces a lot of downtime for our employees. So where we can use that operational structure, we have, and that's what's been informed from Geotab. And then thirdly, where we don't have our own infrastructure, then we'll use the public infrastructure. And that is getting better and better in the northwest where we operate. So it's been them three strands that have been dictated really through the data that we've got on the fleet.
Very good. Thanks so much indeed. I'll hand over to questions from the audience, but before I do, if there are any online questions, please ask those questions through the chat box, and I'll see that online here. But questions from the audience in person, please. Any questions from anyone to anyone in particular? If you could raise your hand, we'll bring the roving mic around. There's a question here from a lady who I think I recognise called Sarah in the first few rows. Sarah, over to you. Where are you from and who is your question to, please?
I would like a bit of a panel debate on this one because this session is about profitability from EV charging. I'm Sarah Sloman. I work for Paythrough and we handle the payment transaction that happens once that charger is connected. So we know the average number of charging incidents that happen and what that costs, and we're working with fleets every day. And we know that a lot of fleets are proactively trying to balance their back to base depot charging, like you've brilliantly done at United Utilities, and you've geofenced yours, right? So you're encouraging people to majority use your own charge points. How did you fund those charges, and when do you see the tipping point coming for those charges that you've supplied for your employees to kind of pay off? What do you think other fleets should be planning for? 10, 12, 15 years?
Should I take that one to begin? So we've, as you say, so we put our own infrastructure in, and the cost of that is we found it to be relatively cheap to put home charging in place. We found it more expensive to put our own in place, but it really depends on what infrastructure costs is needed to actually put the charger on our site. And that's ranged massively. So if we've got the infrastructure in place already, we can literally just plug a charger on. It's a really cheap solution. If we've got to do significant power upgrades, then it is quite cost prohibitive. So we balance that with public infrastructure, and there isn't one size fits all. So if it's very, very expensive for us to put a charger in place, then we'll look at public infrastructure, or we'll actually hold off deploying EVs in that area until we've got the infrastructure in place. But generally what we found is we will only do it if it's cost comparable to diesel vehicles over the whole life cost of the vehicle. So if it's not, then we won't deploy EVs. And at the moment, the EVs that we're deploying based on home, operational, or public infrastructure are pretty much cost comparable over a 7-year life cycle. That's kind of what we've operated on.
We had to get some upgrades for Cowley Marsh Depot to put some of our charging infrastructure in. So that was quite costly, and it cost quite a lot of time as well. And there's quite a time constraint getting those kind of things put in place. I think the total cost of ownership includes the charge point, etc. So we're including that in all of our assessments that we're making. The total cost of ownership for the light commercial vehicles is we're doing okay with those. We can afford to transition those over, so that's okay. Time frame exactly is quite difficult to exactly determine because every instance is quite different. I think we're also putting home charging infrastructure in at some homes, and that's again, it's about a wider question. It's about our flexibility and the way that we manage our fleet and how reactive they can be. So in some instances, people taking vehicles home is the right solution. So I think it's quite a difficult one to actually pin down an exact answer for, if I'm entirely honest.
And I would just say, looking at our customer base, it's certainly these feelings are reflected. So probably it should have been part of my answer about what's been surprising. So the fact that some fleet managers, or I would say probably most fleet managers, aren't aware of the infrastructure upgrade costs that can come if you suddenly switch a whole depot to electric has been something that we've seen in a lot of our customers. And so what we're starting to do now is try to build tools to help with that planning. So not only can you look at which vehicles could transition, but also look at the infrastructure that's in the site, because it's clearly something that's quite important.
Very good. Time for one more question, I think. Any more questions from the audience? Please raise your hand. Gentleman with a beard here. Can you give us your name and where you're from and who the question is to, please?
Hi, yes, for everyone, actually. Simon Pickett from SSE Energy Solutions. We heard this morning about shared home charging, but I haven't heard a lot yet about shared depot charging. Does your data show opportunities there? Is that going to change funding models? Referenced the question before. And do you think that's something we'll see more of in the next 2, 3, 4 years and beyond?
So I think the data certainly shows that chargers aren't fully utilised all the time, I guess, as you'd expect. And so there certainly is an opportunity for that. And I think there's plenty of people in the audience that are probably trying to solve that by creating a scenario where it's easy to share. But the challenge always remains, do you want one of your competitors' vans branded up, parked in your depot charging? So it's possible, I would say, from Geotab's point of view.
I think for us, where we have partners, we are partnering. So some of our third-party organisations do work on our sites. So where that is the case, we are absolutely looking at that. And of course, it brings the cost down if you can reduce your infrastructure. I think there's more factors for us than just the cost of it. So it's things like the security of our sites and who we actually let on there. So there's a few more factors to it. But certainly, if we can, absolutely, it's the right thing to do.
That answer as well. It's about location, security, what you want to do with your business, I think, how it operates. But I think, as we all know, there isn't enough infrastructure out there, so the more that we can collaborate, share in the right circumstances, the better it is for everybody. Because the more throughput you get, the better price everybody's going to get in the longer term. So, yeah, the more we can do on that, the better.
Very good. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for to close this final panel discussion of the 5th EV Summit. So it just remains for me to thank Aaron, Stephen, Tina for those really powerful insights on how data and telematics are driving the transition to electrification forward. So a round of applause to our excellent panel, please.